This happened about 3 years ago when I was working the night shift at a warehouse just outside my town. My shift ended at midnight, and since my car was in the repair shop that week, I had no choice but to take the last bus home. The bus stop was about a 10-minute walk from the warehouse. It sat on the edge of an empty road, surrounded by old buildings and closed stores. During the day, it wasn't a bad area, but at night it felt completely different. The streets were always quiet, too quiet. That night was colder than usual. A strong wind moved through the empty streets, carrying pieces of trash across the pavement. When I reached the bus stop, I checked my phone. 12:07 a.m. The bus was supposed to arrive in 15 minutes. I was alone. At least I thought I was. The streetlights above me flickered every few seconds, creating brief moments of darkness. I sat down on the metal bench and put my headphones on. A few minutes later, I noticed someone approaching from the opposite side of the road. An older man, maybe in his 60s. He wore a dark coat and walked slowly, keeping his head down. At first, I didn't pay much attention. People waited for buses all the time. The man crossed the street and sat on the opposite end of the bench. Neither of us spoke. The wind continued to whistle through the empty road. I looked down at my phone again. Then I heard him laugh quietly. Not a normal laugh. More like he had remembered something funny. I ignored it. A few seconds later, he spoke. "Long night, Ethan?" My stomach tightened. I looked up immediately. "My name is Ethan. I never wear a name tag outside work." I had never seen this man before in my life. For a moment, I thought maybe he had mistaken me for someone else. I looked around to make sure he was talking to me. There was nobody else there. "Sorry?" I asked. The man smiled slightly. "You look tired, Ethan." I stared at him. "Do I know you?" He shook his head. "No." That answer somehow felt worse. I stood up from the bench. The road remained completely empty. No cars, no pedestrians, nothing. The old man seemed completely relaxed, as if there was nothing strange about the situation. I tried to convince myself there had to be a simple explanation. Maybe someone from work had mentioned my name. Maybe he knew a relative. Maybe there was some reasonable answer. Still, something felt wrong. Very wrong. I moved several feet away from the bench. The man continued staring at the road. Then he spoke again. "Your sister still lives in Chicago, right?" Every hair on my body stood up. My sister did live in Chicago. I never talked about her at work. I barely talked about her to anyone. I felt my heart begin to race. "Who are you?" I asked. The man ignored the question. Instead, he looked toward a nearby building. Then he quietly said something that made my blood run cold. "She worries about you." I immediately took out my phone. I was ready to call someone, anyone, but there was no signal. Not a single bar. Which made no sense. I had never lost signal there before. The old man finally turned toward me. His eyes looked strangely empty. Not evil, not angry, just empty. "You should go home tonight," he said. I laughed nervously. "That's exactly what I'm trying to do." The man slowly shook his head. "No." His voice became quieter. "I mean, don't get on the bus." I froze. A cold feeling spread through my chest. "What?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he looked down the road, the same direction the bus would arrive from. I followed his gaze. Nothing was there. Just darkness. Minutes passed. Neither of us spoke. Then, in the distance, I saw headlights. The bus. Finally. Relief washed over me. The vehicle approached slowly. As it got closer, something strange happened. The old man stood up, without saying another word, without looking at me. He simply walked away, across the road, into the darkness. I watched him disappear between two abandoned buildings. Then he was gone. The bus pulled up moments later. The doors opened. I stepped inside. Only 3 passengers were on board. I sat near the back. As we drove away, I looked out the window toward the place where the old man had vanished. He wasn't there. The ride home lasted about 20 minutes. Halfway through the trip, the bus suddenly stopped. Hard, people were thrown forward in their seats. The driver slammed on the brakes. Several passengers shouted. I looked outside. A massive truck had sped through a red light only seconds ahead of us. Had the driver not stopped when he did, the truck would have hit the side of the bus directly. The impact would have been devastating. The driver sat frozen behind the wheel. Everyone on the bus looked shocked. Nobody spoke. Eventually, the ride continued. I arrived home around 1 in the morning. I barely slept that night. The next day, I returned to the same bus stop. Part of me hoped I would see the old man again. I didn't. Instead, I visited a small coffee shop across the street. An older woman worked there. I asked her if she had ever seen an elderly man in a dark coat around the area. She immediately looked confused. Then she asked me to describe him. When I did, her expression changed. The woman became very quiet. Finally, she said something I'll never forget. "That sounds like Mr. Walker." I asked who that was. The woman stared toward the window. "He used to wait at that bus stop every night." I felt my stomach sink. "Used to?" She nodded. "He died 6 years ago." Someone kept leaving notes on my door. This happened when I was living alone in a small apartment a few years ago. The building wasn't anything special. 3 floors, 12 apartments. A quiet neighborhood where nothing unusual ever happened. At least that's what I thought. One morning, as I was leaving for work, I noticed a small piece of paper taped to my front door. At first, I assumed it was a note from the landlord. But when I picked it up, there was only one sentence written on it. "Don't forget to lock your window tonight." There was no name, no explanation, nothing else. I thought it was strange, but I didn't think much about it. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone left it on the wrong door. I crumpled it up and threw it away. The next morning, another note appeared. This one read, "You came home later than usual." I stared at the words for several seconds. The note bothered me. Whoever wrote it knew exactly when I had returned home. I looked around the hallway. Nobody was there. I asked my neighbors if they had seen anyone leaving notes. None of them had. That night, I checked my door twice before going to bed. The following morning, there was another note. "The blue shirt looks better than the black one." My stomach dropped. The day before, I had stood in front of my bedroom mirror trying to decide which shirt to wear. Nobody should have known that. Nobody except me. For the first time, I felt genuinely uncomfortable. Someone wasn't just watching my apartment. They were watching me. Over the next week, more notes appeared. Always taped to my door. Always written in the same messy handwriting. Some were simple. "You should sleep more." Others were much worse. "You looked nervous yesterday. Why do you keep checking the hallway?" Every note proved the same thing. Whoever was writing them could see me, somehow. I bought a small security camera, and pointed it directly at my front door. I was determined to find out who was doing it. The next morning, another note was waiting. My hands shook as I removed it. This one said, "Nice camera." I immediately checked the footage. Nothing. No person, no movement, no one approaching my door. Yet somehow the note had appeared. I watched the recording 3 times. The hallway remained completely empty. That night, I could barely sleep. Every sound in the apartment made me jump. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow footsteps, stopping near my door. I held my breath, then silence. The next morning, another note appeared. This time there was no message, only a simple drawing, a sketch of my apartment, my bedroom, my desk, even the position of my bed. The drawing was accurate, far too accurate. Someone had seen inside my apartment. I contacted the police. They took the note seriously and agreed to patrol the area. For 2 days, no new messages appeared. I thought maybe that was the end of it. Then, on the 3rd morning, I found one final note. The paper contained only 4 words. "Check under your bed." I stood frozen in the hallway. For several minutes, I couldn't move. Eventually, I carried the note inside. My apartment felt different now, smaller, unsafe. I slowly walked toward my bedroom. My heart pounded harder with every step. I knelt beside the bed and looked underneath. There was nothing there, at first. Then I noticed something pushed against the wall. A small envelope. I pulled it out. Inside was a photograph of me sleeping, taken inside my bedroom. I moved out of that apartment 3 days later. The police never discovered who was leaving the notes, and they never found out who took the photograph. To this day, I still think about the final message, because whoever was watching me wanted me to find that picture. They wanted me to know just how close they had been, and that's the part that still keeps me awake at night.